Please join me in welcoming our next guest to the Keynote stage. It's the CEO and co-founder of Ellevest, Sallie Krawcheck, and the executive editor and co-founder of Recode, Swisher.
I don't even know what that music is.
That's the Tar Heel fight song.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes. When they asked us what music we wanted, you said, I don't care.
I don't care.
And I said, I'd like the Tar Heel fight song.
All right, then. Okay. Go.
There we go. There's one Tar Heel in the
North
audience.
Carolina.
All the Dukesters in the audience are like, oh, man, what a bummer.
In any case, thank you for illuminating me. So we're going to be talking about what you're doing. And Sallie and I have done a podcast. We talked for about an hour about Ellevest. So let's sort of review what you were talking about and some of the big topics. So most people know what it is, but give a quick explainer of what you're doing.
Yeah, well, Ellevest is a digital investment platform for women. As we've started this journey, a lot of people have said, well, why for women? I mean, why can't you just invest in a mutual fund or an ETF or an alternative? And the truth is we have a gender investing gap in this country, that women don't invest to the same extent, some to nearly the same extent that men do. It hurts women to the tune of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars over the course of their lives. And if you actually take a step back, it hurts the whole country because the retirement savings crisis is really a woman's crisis because we live so much longer than men do. So we started with the issue of what's out there isn't working, or it would be working. And so let's take a step back, and rather than just, oh, you know, it's a marketing program for women, what can we do to fundamentally address what women are looking for?
All right, before we get to what the differences are, because money doesn't have a gender on some level, you know, in making it known, although it does in earnings and everything else. Talk about your experience on Wall Street. I mean, literally, you were at the top of the most male-dominated industry of all time, times 50.
Well, I don't know, tech is sometimes pretty male, too.
Oh, trust me, I understand that. I understand that very much. But talk about what that experience was like and how they look at women and men differently, or if they do at all. Because I would assume money is money to them.
Well, you know, they would say they don't, but if an industry is 86% male, as the financial advisory industry is, what you find is, as our lead designer says, you think you're talking to both genders, but you find you're talking to the gender who you're most similar to. So what we saw when I was running Smith Barney is we would bring in couples and have advisors speak with them. And the advisor would say, you know, I think I spent about 55%, 45% of my time with the man and the woman. And then we'd play the tape back, and they'd actually see they'd spent 90% of their time talking to the man and 10% of the time talking to the woman. So it's probably no wonder that men leave their financial advisor rate of less than 2% a year, and women in the year after their spouse's death at a rate of more than 70%.
Okay, so tell me.
But other than that, I mean, it was, you know, it was me and a bunch of guys, which was awesome. You know, I say I love guys. I've been married to a couple of them. So this really, it isn't about excluding the men. It's really about including the women.
Right, so including. But you have a specific, your app is not made for men to invest. It's designed.
Oh, we will, men, you can come in and you can say, I'm a man. And as we discussed, we actually forecast out your lifespan. Women live longer. So if you're a man, we kill you sooner.
Okay, all right. So, so talk about how you do it itself, because again, you know, one of the things that you get a lot is, after we did our podcast, I got a lot of tweets, and believe me, I don't go with tweets because there's so many crazy people on it, like all the presidential candidates. But do you?
All the presidents?
No, I'm just saying I don't go with tweets as the indicator of anything. But at the same time, I got a lot of the same. Why are women different? Why do they need something special? This is just a marketing ploy. A lot of them were positive, of course, but a lot of them were, all the criticism was around that, was around the idea of what's different. So why don't you talk about what's different?
Well, look, I hear you, and if it were working for women today, I'd say we don't need to do this. But it's not working for women today. So we said, well, rather than just say women work harder, which is really what the industry does today. Women need more financial education, right? Or women are too risk averse to invest. That women aren't as good investors as men. Math is hard for women. The industry has these rules that they sort of put out there, and essentially we tell women, conform to us. And so, if women were investing the same extent, I would say forget it. Just go ahead and keep the industry as it is, but it isn't, Kara, so something needs to change in our opinion.
Talk about the differences, because when you're saying women are more risk averse, I think actually the truth is, you saw the Iceland banking crisis, it's men are more risk taking almost to the point of danger.
Well, I would say it a little differently. I'd say women are more risk aware.
Risk aware.
And when we say, what is my risk? The industry today will tend to say standard deviation. And you say, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense to me. What I want to know is how much money can I lose? What are my chances of reaching my goal? So it tends to be a bit different than just, women won't, women won't. The other thing, women, they say, won't invest because of the jargon, or they need more financial education. And what we found is men will invest through jargon, women will try to understand it.
Right.
So if you actually strip it away, they're more likely to invest. Women tell us, when we started, women said, I need a relationship. Men say they need a relationship. But again, when we found that we stripped away the jargon and we put in their hands the things they can control. I want to achieve this goal, I want to retire well, I want to buy a home, I want to whatever. Rather than choose an ETF versus a mutual fund, trade this stock versus that stock, their need for having a person also slipped away. So you have these assumptions that are out there, which in some ways are blame the woman or make them work harder. And so we went into it with, what can we do to change
So
this?
talk about the design, because that's a critical part of it. And it's also an online experience. It's stripping away the relationship.
Today it is online.
So you're almost doing it like you're ordering something from Amazon. It's a very simple way to do it, which I think
Well,
everything is going this way.
I would say straightforward, hiding a lot of complexity. So what happens today is she comes through the experience, she tells us, my name is Susie, I'm a smart, successful 35-year-old woman, I make this much money, I live in this zip code, this is how much money I have, and this is what I want to achieve. And we call it a goal shopping page. I want to retire well, I want to buy a home, I want to start a business. And we employ very powerful technology and algorithms that project for her and calculate for her what she can afford to do and when. Underlying her achievement of those goals are managed ETF portfolios, 21 ETFs, that work to get her to her goal or better in 70% of market environments. If she falls off track, we let her know she's off track.
Right.
So it's passive investing, though, with an active twist, because we glide path her to her achievement of goals.
So this dashboard does, though, it has special things aimed at women's lives.
So it projects out that women live longer. It projects out that her salary peaks sooner. Super important in projections, which no one in the industry today does except for us.
That the salary.
What it never does is says, hey, you want this fund, hey, do you want this stock? Because what we learned from her, that's a means to an end. What I really want is to achieve my goals. Are you a fiduciary? Do you have the experience? Do you have the technology to get me there? Okay, then put it in a language that I can understand. The site, the lead designer for this was one of the lead designers who led the redesign of Vogue.com. So it feels like an experience that she's used to, and it really speaks to her in a language that works for her.
Does it have to be like that? Because it's Vogue.com is not the center of financial information in my life, at least. So talk about the idea of why that's important, especially in an online environment, because I think a lot of stuff that is being designed today is not very friendly to anybody. You think of the things that are very friendly.
Oh my gosh.
I think probably the friendliest design that is easiest to use probably would be Tinder. It gets the job done, It's understandable, it's somewhat fun, it's easy to use.
Yeah, but be careful, because when I use the shorthand, first of all, the website, she told us, I want a beautiful experience. When I go to the existing Wall Street firms, I see a whole bunch of articles where you're telling me how smart you are. I want something that looks and feels like what I'm used to looking and feeling. And by the way, I, as a woman, she will say, I believe I can be smart and beautiful too, so why can't the site in which I engage will? But design, actually wrote an article about it for Fast Company this week. We employed from the very beginning, and yes, it's the pretty colors, and yes, it's the pretty look and feel, but we employed both our designer, our head of product, who was at this conference, Alex Street, who was also at Weight Watchers, to start doing research from day one. We've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours, Kara, with women into what works for them and does not. And I tell you, the real surprise for me of it is I reach out to every new client. I'm not getting back one paragraph or a "Hey, Sally, thanks." I'm getting back, "Thank you for doing this. Finally, someone recognizes I'm not comfortable with what's out there. And now let me give you 6 paragraphs and screenshots of what's working and what's not working, because I really want this to be successful." I've never seen anything like this in my life.
I want to talk about what successful is to you in this, how many people, how much money you need under management. But 2 things that strike me is these online financial sites and financial planning sites, there's lots of different ones aimed at lots of different groups.
Yeah.
You know, I think recently, obviously there's a ton of millennial sites because they need more hand-holding apparently. There's tons of ones aimed at people of color. There's all kinds of things like that. Can you talk about this idea of because it used to be sort of this, the bank was the bank was the bank.
Right.
And obviously there's lots of mortgage lending, things like SoFi and others. It seems to be fracturing in some fashion.
Well, but I would say that if we're targeting women, we are targeting half the population.
Right.
And $5 trillion of investable assets. And
But what do you think of the idea of it splitting up? Because, you know, on Wall Street, you all didn't think of that way. It was sort of in it.
well, Kara, the business I ran before Merrill Lynch, in a way it did split up, right? Remember, the symbol was a bull. It's a phallic symbol. So there's underlying message, it's for men. And again, with 86% males and a client base that reflected that, and you're losing 70% of women in the year after their spouse's death, you, whether you think it or not, you're talking to men. And so why isn't there room for one? That's us, right? Who can both project out a woman's life, be very research-based into what she's wanting, and by the way, begin to tackle some of the issues of, you know, no one gets the answer to this question, right? If you're a woman making $85K a year, you take a 2-year career break, how much does it cost you? Most people say it's $170,000. The answer is it's $1.7 million. I think there's room for one of us to have those conversations with these women, with again,
absolutely.
half the population.
But I'm talking more about this idea of splintering of all these financial sites. And online you can do that. You can really target individual types of people and groups of people. Now, how is that changing finance when you look at Wall Street right now?
Well, look, I would take a step back and say, you know, I'm clearly a big believer in digital advice. That I believe that as we go more and more to a fiduciary, which is what Ellevest is to start with, that if you have to put your client's best interest ahead of your own, that having the underlying technology and algorithms, giving them the advice over time, rather than necessarily having, you know, every one of 17,000 financial advisors providing that advice. To me, you can conform that advice, make sure it's the best advice you can, get much more data, much greater data intensity in providing the advice. So I have a strong view, while there are any number of robo-advisors that are out there today, I think it's the wave of the future. Yes, people will still be involved, and it's not yes or no, all or nothing, but to my mind, from the perch of the traditional industry and now from the digital side, this is the way we're going.
Right, that it would be, you're not talking about robo, you're talking about this idea of all online financial.
This is where these groups of people are telling us, whether it's the millennials, women. So another really interesting point, as we looked at, and we've still got a wait list, but as we're looking at when the women are engaging on the site, it's all night. And it's over the weekends. And the traditional providers aren't available at those times.
Right. So do you imagine a future where you don't need any interaction with a bank in an analog form? And then secondly, you know, we've been talking a lot in Silicon Valley about AI.
Right.
What about nobody at all? What about computers?
So when's the last time you went into a bank branch?
Yesterday.
Really?
Yeah, I did.
What were you doing there?
Saying hi.
Got lost? Or
yeah, I have a nice banker. I just was.
I haven't been in. I think we went in to get something notarized.
Yeah.
A year and a bit ago.
Yeah.
I won't say which bank it was, but the banker literally like walked by us and left us because he was going to lunch.
Oh, nice.
There,
well done.
You know, there we've got it. Right?
Yeah.
So I think more and more, it's not where we as an industry want to go, it's where the consumer
absolutely.
is
I think I was in there, I like the lollipops. I think there was something with the lollipops, but I forget, it was something odd, but I don't, you're right, I don't go in. I go in to visit the safety deposit box and things like that, which is analog. It has to necessarily be analog.
And then what's amazing, to your point, is in a digital offering, you can be much more customized. You know, one of the things I saw when I worked for these huge banks is you know, if you were talking to everybody, it was hard to talk to anybody.
Right.
And so people have said to us again and again, well, Sallie, if you're doing this, why would you leave out, you know, why wouldn't you talk to half the population? It's like, because we want to be the one who's talking to the unique needs of women, and in particular, in our case,
So how much money do you have? How many customers do you have now?
So we're still in wait list, so we're not giving those numbers out. But
okay, but how much would you like to, what kind
lots.
Of, lots, okay, lots and lots of money.
But you know, I think the first thing,
what's
Sarah,
success then? I mean,
well, I think the first thing is, if you and I had sat here 6 months ago, you would have known about, and we would have known about the gender pay gap. We might have even known there's a gender expense gap. We might have talked about a gender achievement gap at work. We would have had this view that when it comes to women and money, there were some gaps.
Yeah.
But 6 months ago, if I brought up the gender investing gap, you probably would have said, what are you talking about? And so I really think, you know, the first idea is to make all of us, and women in particular, aware that there is this gap.
Right.
And that closing this gap is good for everybody. I mean, imagine with the $5 trillion, if you begin to unleash some of that into the markets, you know, the powerful force it can be in the economy. So that's really number one. And number two, then being a business that works to close the gender investing gap is obviously very important.
right. I'm just curious, it's interesting because there's been so much discussion of gender recently in the reality show that is our presidential election. Is that affected, or people thinking, because on one side there's a whole lot of horrible things being discussed and coming out, and at the same time it's creating a conversation, a national conversation. It's largely around people's looks and weird things like that, but it still brings up the issue of inequities.
Money is power. I don't think I have to convince this group here that money is power. And so much of what we, you know, I can grab them by the whatever.
Whatever? No, it was a specific thing.
I know it was, but my mother's from the South, so I'm not allowed to say it from this stage.
Right.
But I remember when I started on Wall Street some years ago, and you know, having things done and left on my desk and so on, and I couldn't quit because I needed a job and I needed the money. And so I talk about investing is the best career advice women don't get, because if you invest and if you earn a return over time, which investing has done historically better than being in the bank, and you can get those hundreds of thousands of dollars more over the course of your life, it gives you the power to leave the bad job, to leave the bad relationship, you know, to start the business. And so if we're going to go macro, the strides that women have made in feminism are not complete. Women are not equal with men until we are financially equal with men, and this is a big chunk of it. So I think this moment in time, there's some who say that Donald Trump is feminist best friend because he's bringing to
we don't say that in San Francisco. But
Here's why. Because he's bringing to the surface these issues that still have been bubbling to a greater extent than I think some of us and myself have recognized. And the idea of my goodness, this stuff is still going on, is actually, I think, an extremely important moment in our country's history.
Ah, interesting. Let me ask for the final question. We only have just 2 more minutes. Do women invest differently? Like, we were talking about risk averse, but are there differences in style?
Yeah,
and
totally.
And when you're in an online environment, I'd imagine if you don't have to meet someone, where someone often like I just was I have some financial advisors and I cover tech and I'm pretty good at it and I know more than most people. And I'm always explained to by my male investment advisor about tech, and he's always wrong.
Oh my gosh, that must be so fun for you.
Well, I shut him down rather quickly, but it's definitely irritating on some level. And is it better to be in an online environment in that case where you don't have to have that? And then how are women investing differently?
So what women do tell us, women say that, not my words, the words of the women we've done the research with, I feel patronized. That these financial advisors who are 50 plus, 60 plus, I feel like they're condescending to me, which is why women rank the financial services industry and wealth management in particular 33 out of 33 of the industries that serve them. So that's what they're saying. Do we invest differently? What I'll tell you is that every article you read about mistakes investors make, over trading, panicking in bad markets, paying too much in fees through over trading, should be retitled Investing Mistakes Men Make. The mistakes women make tend to be I will invest later. So, you know, I'm going to understand it better. I'm going to get this jargon defined. I'm going to figure out what standard deviation makes. I'm going to figure out what a managed account is. I will invest later, and then they tend to wait, and it costs them a ton. When women invest, whether it's at the hedge fund manager level, the mutual fund manager level, or the individual investor level, they are as good or better investors than men because they tend to not mess with it as much and tend to leave it. Some say have a longer term perspective, but tend to leave it. So it really is an issue of helping, you know, give women the conduit.
Just do it.
And so much of what's out there, they say, is some women's initiative that doesn't really feel authentic or real to me and doesn't feel like it's taking my needs into account.
So very last question, do you like doing an entrepreneurial thing versus Wall Street? I don't even want to ask what was put on your desk, but what's the one difference?
Waking up at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, so everybody talks about Wall Street's so hard, it's so hard. You know, when you're running these huge businesses, you know, that have billions of dollars of earnings and the government tends to bail out when they get into trouble, there's a certain safety net that's there in your business. And I knew running huge businesses, look, I can mess it. You know, we can mess stuff up. I can make a lot of mistakes when you're earning a couple $2 billion a year. But when you're at a startup, I don't have to tell you, you've got 3 mistakes in you, maybe, you know, of any size, maybe 2, and you run out of money. And so, but that being said, the other side of it is enormously exhilarating to be doing something. You know, today I think you can have a bigger impact on the world around you from a startup than you can from some of these big companies. And so the ability to have that impact and really see these emails that are beginning to tell us, you know, you're even by raising my awareness of this, you're having an impact on my life, is really meaningful and important.
So you like it?
I love it.
All right, Sallie Krawcheck.
Thank you, Kara, thank you.